Welcome into the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast, Sportsmemo with Robbie Vino. Rob, welcome into the pod. How are you?
I'm good today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Always excited to talk every game on the board. And we also got it simulcast on the YouTube channel. So if you like putting faces with the voice, you can check that out on YouTube as well. But, of course, the podcast staying on Apple, iTunes, the whole bit. So wherever you're consuming it, we really don't mind. But, Robbie, let's get after it at the top of the card here, man. Try to find some winners. Carolina at Tampa Bay. We got the Panthers laying 1.5 to 2.5, depending on where you're shopping. 47.5 the total in Tampa.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Drew, because you get an early season divisional rematch. Very rarely do you see a team playing somebody for the second time this early in the season. But first time around, Carolina, Tampa Bay, we pretty much remember it as the game where why didn't Cam Newton sneak it in from the 1 yard line? Instead, they gave it to Christian McCaffrey, went wide. They didn't get it. They lose the game 20-14. In that game, low scoring, probably would have expected it to be higher scoring, but I'm always of the opinion that coaches try to fix what went wrong the first time, the second time around. So I think we'll see Christian McCaffrey, who was really held down in that game, Drew, only 54 total yards from scrimmage in that game, receiving and rushing. So certainly Tampa Bay did the best job on him of anybody all season long. And their run defense has been great. Number 2 in the NFL, only 69 yards per game allowed. So that's kind of a clash. The Carolina ground game, they really want to establish McCaffrey against the Tampa Bay run defense. And on the other side of the coin, you have the other clash, which is Tampa Bay with their stud wide receivers and Jameis Winston against the Carolina pass defense, which has been outstanding. Their pass rush has been good. Their secondary has been great. So you kind of have strength versus strength here. I tend to think that the Tampa Bay numbers are a little bit skewed because in the passing game, they've made most of their hay on 2 games, the game against the Giants and the game against the Rams. Other than that, in their other 3 games, their passing yardage has been 190 total yards or less against San Francisco, against Carolina, and against New Orleans. I think Carolina can defend what Tampa does best better. I know there's a little bit of angst back in Carolina because it'll be their first time over in London. Lucky in this game, Drew, the second one in a row played at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It's going to rain for about a day and a half, and then miraculously, 3:30 start time in the afternoon, it's going to stop raining for this game. So I don't know how bad the field will be. Probably be okay. I think, like I say, Carolina is better equipped to stop what Tampa Bay does. For that reason, I'll say Carolina, but I don't know that I can get to where this price range has gone, right? Tampa was a favorite. Now we see the shift all the way through Pick'em, all the way to Carolina 2.5. Interesting game. I don't know that I'll have a play side or a total here.
Yeah, I think I said in Tampa. Of course, this is on the other side of the pond in England. So Carolina at Tampa Bay there. Neutral site game, I guess you could say. We got Cincinnati at Baltimore up next, Robbie. 10.5. That's the Ravens laying at home. 48 the total here.
Schedule maker wasn't kind to the Ravens. I mean, it happens to teams every year, but it's difficult when you play 3 divisional games in a row. For the Ravens, they lost to Cleveland. They came back last week. They beat Pittsburgh in overtime. Now they have to face the Bengals. The Bengals, obviously the lesser of all the teams in the AFC North, but still a difficult matchup when you have to play 3 divisionals in a row. Fundamentally, the question mark here will be Cincinnati's offensive line. But I tell you the truth, Drew, Baltimore doesn't put any pressure on the quarterback. Both of these teams rank in the bottom 6 in the NFL in sacks produced by their defense. I think Baltimore's got 9 this year, and the other side, Cincinnati, has 6. So neither team gets to the quarterback. This should help both of these guys. Andy Dalton with protection certainly can get things done, and Lamar Jackson will be happy to see a defense where he should be able to get some things done here as well. Baltimore's secondary wasn't really tested last week by Mason Rudolph. And, of course, Mason Rudolph went out of that game, and we saw Devlin Hodges. So they weren't tested. I would take their statistics from last week's game kind of with a grain of salt. Both bad defenses. The total here is 48. I'd love to play it over, but 48's a key number. 27-21 still doesn't get you home. If I could find 47.5, maybe I'll get there. But at 48, I just don't think there's a play either side or total in this game.
All right, he's Robbie Vino. Check out his services at sportsmemo.com. We're going to be breaking down the top half of the card on this segment, and then we'll bring in Hunter Engelhart to break down the bottom half of the NFL card. He's got his 5% plays, man. They are hitting at a very high number. 4.5% total, 67 and 42. That's 61.5%, near 50% ROI since 2018. That's our on the totals. He's got his 5% up at sportsmemo.com, and you can get it for only $39. You can get his 3-day all-access, no coupon code needed there. You can get Robbie Vino's 3-day all-access package at sportsmemo.com for only $39. We just discounted it on the site, so check it out, sportsmemo.com. We got Seattle at Cleveland up next. 47 the total. Got nearly a pick-em price here, Robbie, with the Seahawks pretty much laying 1 across the board on the road.
Yeah, a lot of scheduling stuff here to consider, Drew. I mean, you start off with the obvious. Cleveland's on a short week, but they do get to play at home. Cleveland, right now, 0-2 against the NFC West. Beaten badly by San Francisco Monday night, also beaten by the LA Rams at home. Cleveland, 0-2 at home, straight up and against the spread. So a lot of goose eggs for the Browns heading into this one, as opposed to Seattle, which will be coming west to east for a 1 o'clock start for the second time this year. We've got something to base it off of. They came to Pittsburgh. They won that game 28-26, so maybe west to east isn't as big a deal for them. Seattle, however, is off of 2 straight divisional games. And I make a lot of these division, conference, and non-conference, but here we sit in a non-conference game after Seattle's just played 2 divisional foes. So that, to me, that's a weak spot for Seattle here. I would expect Cleveland, who has New England on deck at New England, to come fully focused here in this game. So situationally, scheduling-wise, I think it adds up for Cleveland. The Browns are going to have to try and find a way to run against Seattle, but the other side of the line, Drew, Seattle should run the football against these Cleveland Browns. We just saw Cleveland shredded Monday night by San Francisco. Of course, that's a power running game, much like the Seahawks try to bring to the table. Cleveland giving up 151 rushing yards per game. That bodes well for the Seattle ground attack, which features the added dimension of Russell Wilson. Other side of the line, Seattle's run defense only gives up 80 yards. So it's going to be tough for Nick Chubb and company. I know that they had that big game against the Ravens, but when you look back at that, really it was a couple big runs by Chubb that produced the yardage in that one. So I don't know how much success Cleveland will have on the ground. They'll have to have some to open it up for Mayfield. It's kind of a conflicting game when you go to handicap it and make arguments more for one side than the other. I can't really make. I could make the scheduling argument in favor of, Seattle. I could make a ground game at the point of attack in favor of Seattle, but I could also make a scheduling argument, as I did, in favor of the Browns here. The NFL becomes so situational, unlike college football, where we can rely on, this team's better than that team, they'll be able to do this or that. The NFL just week to week becomes situational. I have a gut feeling that Cleveland's the right side here, but I haven't gotten to the window with it yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm looking to bet the Browns, but I see what you're saying in terms of just spot-wise. It's kind of tricky handicap here. We got Houston at Kansas City up next. Chiefs laying 4 in Arrowhead, 55 the total, Robbie.
I think we have one here where the fundamentals might just outweigh anything, Drew. Kansas City lost nose tackle Chris Jones midway through that game against Indianapolis the other night. Mm-hmm. We saw Indianapolis spot it and immediately take advantage of it. They ran the football almost the whole second half, the Colts did. They wound up with 180 yards. KC could not stop them from running. Houston's not necessarily a power ground attack, but they'll use it in order to establish the pass here. They get enough out of their running game, 129 yards per game. 25 of that goes to Deshaun Watson, the mobile quarterback, so it's not a pure 129 rushing yards. But still, I think they'll use that to set up the pass. Kansas City's pass defense, if they can't stop the run, it becomes a circus for KC defensively, which it's been for the better part of 2 years now. It's a bad defensive unit with one of their key players out. However, if you go the other side of the field, it looks like Tyreek Hill is going to be back. And if Tyreek Hill is back, Houston's pass defense is a travesty. 270 yards allowed per game. Inside that 270, we have Carolina with Kyle Allen, whose offense has been dumbed down so that Allen can play mistake-free football and sort of manage the game. And inside that, schedule of Houston's is Gardner Minshew's first start. Mm-hmm. So, 270 is a lot. I think KC moves the ball up and down the field. People are concerned about the Pat Mahomes injury, but I'm one that isn't really concerned about the ankle here. I think he'll be just fine. Houston doesn't really generate enough, defensive pressure to bother him that much. 55 looks a little bit light, Drew, where the total is concerned. The weather's going to be good in KC. Like most Kansas City games that become track meets, I can't see why this one wouldn't either. We saw Will Fuller go crazy last week for the Houston Texans. And the one thing about Deshaun Watson, as we know, given time, he likes to go vertical down the field and usually with success. So if they have any type of success running the football where Kansas City has to play them honest, this could turn into a back-and-forth track meet. I think over 55 is probably the right way.
Robbie, two more games in this segment. Next one up, 259-260. The rotation numbers, New Orleans at Jacksonville. Looks like a total of 43 with 1.5 being the line here with Jacksonville favored. This, I wouldn't normally think that the Jags would be favored over the Saints, but here we have it.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially since Teddy Bridgewater's done nothing except go 3-0 against the spreads since he took over at quarterback. The defense has helped. But Bridgewater's been good enough against Seattle, Dallas, and Tampa Bay. So, when you line them up on the field, you wonder why maybe Jacksonville's favored. Perhaps, again, Drew, these non-conference games get a little bit wacky. They're just not the most serious ones of all for these teams. Not to say that you just roll out the football and go play them, but for New Orleans, it's not playing a NFC South game. Probably means a little more to Jacksonville, who's going to get Jalen Ramsey back for this game, by the way. So that's a big plus for their pass defense. Saints win 31-24 last week. Final score is a lot closer than the total yardage was. They outgained Tampa Bay by 205. And I think Tampa scored a touchdown with about 13 seconds left. So that game really was, a little bit, the final score is a little bit phony. Jacksonville behind Minshew, boy, oh boy, you can't count them out. They've scored over 20 points in their last 3 games. He's brought some life to that offense. Leonard Fournette has brought some life to that offense. I'd love to make a case for Jacksonville if they weren't the favorite, but I'm not going to make the case for them as a favorite. I think New Orleans, person for person, is the better team. And I think when you add in the fact that Christian McCaffrey had the game that he had last week running the football, and you have Alvin Kamara on the Saints side, you could see the Saints probably leaning on the run here, helping Teddy Bridgewater out again. I think his numbers, Drew, I saw the other day as a starting quarterback in the league are 16-3 against the spread, which is absolutely crazy. Tough freight train to step in front of right here. I don't know that I'd be willing to do it.
Robbie, last game up for this segment. We got Philadelphia at Minnesota. 44 the total. Vikings laying 3 at home, hosting the Eagles.
Well, here we go with the Vikings. We're going to find out now if they are truly addicted to this philosophy of running the football relentlessly at their opponents. Because Philadelphia has a secondary, once again, for like the 3rd or 4th week in a row, that is so banged up. And when you have Adam Thielen, when you have Stephon Diggs and company, you should be able to find a lot of holes in the Philly secondary. If Minnesota is not married to running the football with Dalvin Cook, and maybe they'll be forced out of it here, Drew, because Philadelphia's run defense is as good as any in the NFL. If there's one thing they do well on the defensive side, it's stop the run. So, again, if I put my head coaching shoes on, I would walk out there and I would have a play or a game plan devised starting off throwing the football and loosening Philadelphia up a little bit. If Minnesota comes out that way, could be a long day for the Eagles. I'm just not so sure because we see the problems that they've gone through with Stephon Diggs in particular, not getting the football enough. These receivers weren't happy with the amount of times the ball had been thrown because Minnesota came with a new philosophy this year. But last week it loosened up somewhat. Adam Thielen had a big day. It's his second big day in the last 3 weeks. On the Philadelphia side, offensively they're good. And it doesn't really matter how good Minnesota is defensively. I think the Eagles can get their share with Carson Wentz and company. So to me, if it's hard to gauge because I don't know where Minnesota is going to come offensively, but I would play Philadelphia for sure if I knew that the Vikings were going to come out and try and run Dalvin Cook down their throat. It's not going to work. I don't think they're stupid enough to do it. Minnesota has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder remaining from that playoff beating a couple of years back. They still remember it. The fans certainly remember it. In Minnesota, the place gets a little bit loud. I don't know that anything phases the Eagles, though. Like I said, I'd love to be on the Eagles here, but more than anything, I may try to get this one from a totals perspective. If I can get the right number, I'd like to play it over because I think Minnesota has the capability. And you know what, Drew? If they're in catch-up mode, saying that Philadelphia is ahead and Minnesota really has to go to the pass, it'll favor them because they'll still find the holes in the secondary. Do you believe in Kirk Cousins? I don't know. Not many people do, but I think you might be able to catch an over in that game.
Yeah, I don't believe in him against good defenses, but I think he's serviceable. So, keep that in mind. Robbie has hit 58% with his 5% plays in all sports, generating a bankroll upgrade. That's ROI, return on investment of 78% since 2014. Very selective with his 5% plays and very profitable. He's got one up for Sunday's action in the NFL. You can get that at sportsmemo.com. You can also get it with his 3-day all-access package, which we just discounted to $39. No coupon code needed there at sportsmemo.com. He's Robbie Vino. Rob, you want to throw anything out before we shut this segment down?
As always, we just want to wish all the listeners and viewers now, Drew, good luck this weekend with all your tickets. Hopefully they cash. Hopefully we can help you get to the window to cash, and we'll be back at it again next week.
And Robbie, actually, I almost forgot. We had a tweet in terms of any questions for Rob or myself on the podcast, and we did get a couple questions here. Didn't go over them with you. Cool to shout them out. Just go live here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
Shout out to Mystic Rich for this question. Arkansas, there's no way Ben Hicks isn't starting versus Kentucky with the way he looked versus Texas A&M, and Kentucky has no QB. Sawyer Smith is horrible. Can't imagine how bad the kid in front of him and behind him is. BYU and Arkansas, both strong plays, win and cover easy. Do you agree with that in terms of BYU and Arkansas this weekend, Robbie?
Yeah, I think they're probably onto something with Arkansas. The kid behind Sawyer Smith is Lynn Bowden, the wide receiver right now, but he would be a converted high school option type quarterback. He got in for a couple of plays last game when Sawyer Smith got hurt. I can't disagree with the feeling that maybe Ben Hicks should be the starter, but Nick Starkel took the first team reps this week, so it looks as if Nick Starkel is your starting quarterback here now that he's healthy once again. He got hurt tackling a defender who had intercepted a pass of his down on the goal line against A&M. But Starkel took the first team reps. Starkel was taking all the media questions, not Ben Hicks. So unless, they're trying to trick somebody, it looks like Starkel will be the quarterback there. And I can't disagree. At this point in time where Kentucky's season is heading, especially offensively, taking Arkansas plus 6.5 might be worth a shot there. I also think over the total might be worth a shot, Drew, because Arkansas, with their full complement of receivers, which they haven't had for 4 weeks, can be pretty dynamic when you throw them together with Rakeem Boyd running the football. So we'll see. Kentucky's defense has gone south, and maybe you could get both Arkansas and over.
All right, Robbie Vino, good stuff. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Vino Sports. I'm Drew Martin on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, we'll be right back with Hunter Engelhardt finishing up the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast.